Good morning and welcome, everybody. Thank you for registering for today's masterclass, which is with Peter Heath from Venue Performance. We're going to be talking about ensuring that you're maximising your revenue from M&E, and it's all about benchmarking and ensuring that you're leading the pack rather than being left behind. It's 10 a.m. It's Tuesday, the 23rd of April, 2024, which is St. George's Day. We're due to be live with you for about 30 minutes, including time for questions. I'm Jane Pendlebury. I'm CEO of HOSPA, the Hospitality Professionals Association. I'm delighted to be joined once again by Peter, who is an expert in all things figure-wise around M&E. Please do ask questions throughout using the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. If there's not enough time to answer the queries, then we will get back to you afterwards. There will also be a recording of this on our website within the next few days. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get cracking. Peter, how has the first quarter of 2024 looked for meetings and events?
Sketchy, I think, is the answer. There's hello everybody, by the way. Sorry, should have said that to begin with. Thank you for thank you, Jane, and hello everybody. January and February were not great months. I mean, they never are great months, to be honest with you, because the market is just recovering. Well, it's normally recovering from a very heavy Christmas, although Christmas parties seem to have ebbed away a little bit. And then obviously January is quite cold and miserable. As is February, so it's been quite mixed, but on the whole, not great. But then again, it never is great. And if we look at the trends, which we can do when appropriate, we can see what the trends are. And there's always a bounce in March. So March, it always kicks off and doesn't rescue the quarter, but it certainly makes up for some of the sort of twitchiness of January and February. And then looking forward to the next quarter, that's also looking. God, I sound like a doom and gloom, don't I? The M&E market is good on the whole, by the way, just to let everybody. And also, this is in the context of last year, because last year was a boom year, right? So 2023 was, everybody had a great time in terms of double-digit growth. But then there's a bit of sobering of 24. Cost of living crisis is affecting corporate budgets. Easter was a real pain in the backside for everybody this year. It kind of wiped out 3 weeks, which it normally wipes out 2, but because of the way it fell this year, it's sort of wiped out 3. So that was a bit annoying for everybody. So it's been a sticky start to the year, and I don't think that's going to get any different for the rest of the first half of the year. But I think the second half will be a lot better.
Okay.
Unless we're plunged into depression after a general election.
Maybe. Easter's a lot later next year, isn't it? So that might have a interesting. I think it's quite away into April. Normally, when schools are going back, it'll just be when Easter's kicking in. So all the holiday will be before the actual Easter bank holiday weekend. So that'll be
but I sort of, as an observer rather than an operator, I get a little bit frustrated because everybody knows when Easter is. So you can, we've done enough Easters to realize that Easter is a pain, right? So one should think that one should be able to budget and plan around Easter, but Easter always I have the same conversation every year. It always catches everybody by surprise. Oh no, Easter. It's like, well, you knew what was happening. But I think this year, to be fair, and in their defense, something weird did happen this year. I think the school holidays were spread over a longer period, and they didn't really know that in terms of because obviously meetings and events is all about national people, well, often about national people getting together, and different counties and regions have different school times. So the whole Easter thing just got very, very dispersed and protracted. But yes, you're right. They should be able to think next year that, okay, that's when Easter is, learn the lessons, budget around it, and not get too freaked out about it.
Yeah. The other thing you said there just reminded me of something from COVID. somebody in during COVID, we were talking actually about hotel valuations, but they were predicting when things would be back to normal. So this is going back 4 years. It was sort of early COVID time, and all the predictions were very doom and gloom, saying things won't be back up from a valuation point of view until 25, 26. Now, I think that was possibly a little bit pessimistic, but I think actually we won't know what normal is because we boomed since COVID because everyone was catching up, making up for lost time, and now we're sort of paying the price for everything that happened last year. And perhaps from a getting back to normal point of view, it will be 25, 26 before we can actually look at last year and think it's likely to be more or less the same.
I think you're absolutely right. And budgeting in 24 is a nightmare because you know it's going to be lower than 23, but you're kind of hoping that it won't be, but you know that it will be. So where do you set your budgets? The economy was a massive kicker. That was a kick in the what's, wasn't it? Inflation, interest rates, that just sort of, yeah, it was just such a neggy. But that was, oh, it's only going to be temporary, it's going to come down, and then it lagged on. Even now, for example, I'm predicting the second half of the year is going to be better because inflation is coming down, interest rates are coming down. But even now, I read in the papers last night that the mortgages are going up again because the interest rates are going to be longer before they get chopped. So some people are even saying now, summer. Sorry, late summer, sort of August, September time, and it was supposed to be, it was potentially going to be May, June time. So yeah, it's just going to be a year. I think well, I was going to use the word death by a thousand cuts. That's a really negative, but it's going to be a year of really awkward, and it's so up and down. It will be growth. Emily will grow in 24, but only by a single digit small amount, whereas it was double digit last year, it'll be single digit this year, and you'll have to fight for a lot of stuff, and get close to your clients and I've done a lot of stuff recently where, getting close to your customers to find out what they really want and why they're really doing things before you then put them in your pipeline, because actually you might find that they're really flaky right from the off. So yeah, it's the time to be right on your game, I think, in 2024, because it's not a high tide. So yeah.
And the uncertainty of when the general election might be is just going to, I mean, our annual conference is on the 14th of November, and I've heard twice now that that's a potential date for the general election. Of course, my ears are very hooked up to that, but I'm sure other people are thinking, well, it could be December, it could be this, it could be that, and that might put people off booking some bigger events as well because they're worried about the attendance, because people might want to go and vote the old-fashioned way rather than a postal vote, which we're obviously going to be encouraging everyone to do if it falls anywhere near post space.
Post space, absolutely. Do it all remotely. You need to trudge down to your local. Yeah, I think the general election is a funny one. I sat in on an STR presentation the other day. Apparently, Americans don't. So what we all really want is international travel to come back, because they, especially things like Americans, they bring a lot of business in, and there is a narrative that Americans don't travel during an election year. STR said categorically that is not true. That is, the stats just prove that that doesn't happen, which I was really surprised about, because all the chat on the radios was Americans don't travel in an election year, and business travel is a big deal, obviously, for the UK. And then you look at our own experiences, and and I did a presentation last week, and I said I look back at all the data, I can't see any massive impact around a general election. And Venue Directory, who are now owned by Cvent, said they can't see any data that suggests there's any impact. And yet all the operators around the room were going, well, that's ridiculous. There's always a massive impact on the election. So yeah, and also who's going to be spending money when they know there's tax cuts coming, or do they have to spend the money before the tax cuts come? It's just more uncertainty, isn't it? Which is a bit boring. But that's probably what 24 is going to be, uncertain.
Yeah. I think we often as an industry do suffer very early on the confidence thing before many other industries will even notice that there's a lack of confidence in the wider public.
Okay, well, I'm not, I am by nature a very, very positive person. And I do say that there will be growth in 24 in meetings and events. So that's the backdrop. The backdrop is it's going to be a good year, but there's variations of good. And my data is showing that bookings, average number of bookings. So we do a chart which looks at average number of bookings per venue per month, and that's going down. January and February, March, down consecutively every month. So that's showing you, that's clearly demonstrating the intent is ebbing away. Now, if I looked at the same period in 2023, in fact, shall I show you a chart
That's a great idea.
that I use? There we go. As we're benchmarking company. Right. Is that a decent size, Jane? Can you see that?
Yep, that's
Okay,
great.
right, fine. So, all right, it looks a bit googly, so just focus your eyes, everybody. But what you're looking at here is called the bookings chart. And normally what you do is you compare your own venue or hotel with your competitive set or with the market. And this line or these lines are the market, okay? So there's no property, it's only looking at the market. And we're looking at January. If we see here, January 20. So this is live on Venue Performance, right? So this isn't a slide. This is live in the system. So if anybody has got any questions about anything, then feel free to ask them, and we can interrogate the data live as we speak. So this is January 22 to December 24, because we take data that things that happen in a month. So inquiries happen in a month, bookings happen in a month, events happen in a month. So if an event books today, for example, for 6 months' time, we can effectively see that business on the book. So we can see the pace of things. Now, the light line, if you can make that out, if for all of you that got very nice fancy systems that give you good color discrepancy, the light line is the average number of bookings per venue per month. And the darker line is the average number of events per venue per month. And do you remember I told you that March was a good one? Well, that's March there, look. Okay, so January and February were a bit low. March kicked up, and I think there's quite a decent growth there in March. But then again, if we look at March last year, that's January and February. Okay, so same trend. January and February, March, bang. So the growth isn't as high as last year for March, but more importantly, this is the bookings that are happening January, February, March. They're going down. Last year, January, February, March, they were going up a little bit. So we've just got to be careful that we sort of we keep this upward trajectory. You can see that things were going, that's 22, that's 23. So the things are going up and up and up, and things are starting to just soften down a little bit. Now that's still high, but they are starting to soften down a bit. And then we can do things like look at different types of events. So let's say, for example, we wanted to look at conferences. Let's look at conferences between, I don't know, 50, let's go 50 and what should we say, 300? 300? That's a good sort of solid bit of business, isn't it? That's a solid bit of cash that hotels and conference venues will look for. And again, we can see that the general trend is up, but it's starting to sort of come down a bit. Although, look, January, February, so those bookings were down in March again, but March, the number of conferences delivered was up. So, that's the story for conferences, for example. And then what we can do is we can say, okay, let's look at small meetings. What's happening in the small meetings world of, let's say, say small meetings, 0 to what, 30 maybe, 30 people. They are, let's wait. There we go. So January, February, March. So they're not booking either. And the jump in those is less. The number of those that are executed is becoming less. So you can see there's a mood happening here. There's a general kind of, I wouldn't say it is a swing. I'd say it is just a we're just like after the pandemic, we all wanted to go meet our friends and get drunk and have parties and get married and have babies and things. That happened. Just that was what it was like in the meetings and events industry in 2023. It was like we find, and I was amazed at how many stories I heard of people still getting together for the first time as a business back end of 2023, and we're out in 2021, so it takes that long for businesses to sort of mobilize things, and we can start to see that there are a little bit of a dampening of that sort of excitement, and as you said, Jane, return to some sort of consistency, and we can see that in the big markets as well. So if we look at the private equity markets, we look at the hotel investment market, they're sitting on their money, but they're now starting to release that because they can see a little bit of normality coming in, mainly due to inflation and interest rates. They're sort of calming down across the market as well. So yeah, I mean, we can segment this data, all the way through to weddings, through to banqueting, parties. What's the Christmas party looking like? The Christmas parties. That's sort of gone away a little bit. And then of course you look at pricing. Pricing's going up, but then costs are going up. So that's a bit of a tight squeeze on budgets as well. Doesn't dampen the appetite, interestingly, but it is you've got to be mindful of costs of these things. And as we know from our friends at Hotstats, F&B is struggling in hotels. F&B is under pressure in hotels because people, that the cost of F&B is so high, and running an F&B outlet is so high that you've really got to make some volume sales there. And in hotels, a lot of the time they will go out and eat on the streets because the high street offering is so great. But conferencing and banqueting and meetings and events bring in good F&B business as well. But the clients are looking at less spend on F&B and more spend on experiences, for example. So again, when people want to get together, they want to really excite and enthuse and give their attendees a real wow factor. And you can do that with food. We all know you can do that with food because the chefs can do amazing things, but they want more than that. So the budget is going into other areas as well, whether it be gamification or music or all those things. So there's quite a lot happening in the industry at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say that. I was at IHTF last week in Barcelona, and the hotel we were in, it was very near the airport, not near the cool bit of Barcelona. And I can't fault the hotel at all. It was great. But when we had dinner in the evening there on the first evening, you could tell they weren't trying to entice us back. They knew they weren't going to get us back on the second night. It was great. There was nothing to fault them, but they just knew that everyone was going to go into Barcelona. They didn't wow us at all. And it almost felt like, oh, we've got to do this food for them because they're it's included. But nobody did want to stay in the hotel on the second night because who wants to stay in a hotel near the airport when you can go into Barcelona?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But the flip side of that is that they had a bar at the very top of the hotel. It was called Skyfall, and it was a really cool, brilliant bar with amazing views. And they really put all their efforts into that. So everybody, those that did stay at the hotel, went up to the bar, and those that didn't went up to the bar when they came back. So I'm sure they probably, I make lots of assumptions here, but I imagine their revenue is very beverage related and not so food related. But I suspect overall it's not bad. So you just have to adjust to your audience, don't you?
You do have to adjust your audience, and you have to also, I think you've got to be going back to being 24 being a tight year. You've got to really know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And you've got to go after the business that you're going to nail because you've got a brilliant experience and loads of teams that can deliver that, rather than trying to go for everything. And that brings it all down to, the sales process and the questioning and the understanding of the client and getting close to the client and really finding out what they want. There's such a variation. I mean, even what, so we're doing an event, okay, in June, and and I've been looking for a venue, and I know venues in London. I've been doing this for years. I am still amazed by how appalling the responses are from venues. I mean, I can't get my head around how nobody or very few people ask me anything about my event and what I was trying to achieve and all that kind of thing. Somebody even said to me, they just gave me a sandwich buffet, which I just thought, oh God, I'm inviting event people. I'm not going to give them the sandwiches for the lunch food. It was just, yeah, there's still an issue with that, I think, with training up and getting our teams to be better at engaging with the customer and finding out what they really want. And
Mm.
then that brings in the whole picture of what are you really good at delivering? And therefore, what type of event are we best suited for? And that's all where your competitive analysis comes in, isn't it? To make sure that you're not missing out on anything that your competitors are getting. So yeah, there's quite a bit going on. But I think we're in a good space. Meetings and events is growing. If you look at the hotel world, they are they are they're piling into M&E more so than ever before. Beds are softening a little bit now. Leisure is softening a little bit. Cost of living is really biting. So they're looking at other areas. And because M&E came back quite quickly after the pandemic, they're now realizing actually there's a bit of money in M&E. There's some big slugs of cash there. So I've seen a great uptake in M&E from hotels that weren't, it's only 8-10% of the business not really interested in it, and then I'm thinking, well, can we grow that to 15-20% of the business, and the flow through in terms of profit is really really good.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's starting to sort of go mainstream in hotels. There's obviously the big ones that do the big, the Intercons and the Hilton Mets and what have you, but there's a lot of other ones coming into it as well. So it's fascinating time.
It is, and there's some utterly brilliant commercial leaders out there who see the value of M&E, but they often still have that same battle with rooms revenue and whether that's attributed to to meetings and events or
Yeah.
not. There's a lot of politics still going on internally, and there's potentially good reason for that because of your STR rating and all of those things on bedrooms. But sometimes I think, well, everybody always needs to take a step back and have a look at the big picture. And M&E is somewhere where there is potentially a lot of opportunity for growth, just by looking at it differently, coming in with fresh eyes, and doing what we did to rooms 20, 25, even probably 30 years ago, starting
Mm.
to look at how we can revenue manage them, how we can make the best possible use of the space that we have. I mean, years ago, it's not so long ago, probably about 30 years ago, when it was just all about occupancy in bedrooms, and that was it. And it's a little bit like that still with meetings and events, and we just need to make it a little bit more sophisticated, which your data is brilliant at enabling people to do, but getting that accepted by all the different departments in the hotel, for the overall profitability of the hotel, not just the department.
Yeah, I think that the challenge has been to date that the M&E teams haven't necessarily been able to provide that much complex evidence.
Mm.
So there's a big slug of money which M&E gets, and it's, do better this year by 5% or whatever it is. But they haven't, all the tools, all the insights, all of the clever techniques used for managing beds and rooms and occupancy, revenue management systems, benchmarking, they've always been there, haven't they? So it's very transparent what's happening in the beds market. It's not transparent at all in the M&E market. So the M&E market has been screaming for ages for the same tools, but for M&E, and they're
Mm.
finally
Mm.
coming on board. We're led to believe they're finally coming on board. The tech providers are talking a good game of, all the RMS suppliers are talking a good game of actually giving the meetings and events what they want. Benchmarking, which is obviously what we do, that hasn't been around for very long. We've only been around a few years, so nobody has has been able to see what the competition's doing. Lots of chat about it, but nobody really tells the truth when you're all having a pint and saying, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing," it's always the same. "Well, I'm doing really well." "Yeah, I'm having a great, I'm really busy." It's like, well, okay, really? Whereas now you can see, I mean, obviously you can't see an individual property, but you can see what the general sort of concept, the same concept as STR do for beds, we do for M&E. So I think the combination of benchmarking, RMS for M&E is going to give more power to the M&E RM elbow and the commercial leaders, and more evidence to show what can be achieved. So I think it's going to grow significantly over the next several years. I think it's going to get even more mainstream.
Mm. And potentially, based on what you said about trying to book a venue, we're booking venues all of the time. It might be worth just having someone whose job it is to be on the phone all day long, someone jolly and fun, not actually potentially do any of the work, but just get all the information, make that client feel important and say, right, okay, I've got all that. And then maybe they can get somebody else to do a lot of the work behind them and then deliver it. But it is that personal contact. I know exactly what you mean on that. And the
It's
attention.
just, yeah, I think it's just weird. I think it's really, really weird how so literally somebody, I phoned a venue up the other day. I don't know, it's only one, sort of sample size of one. It wasn't one actually, it was several, but this particular one, she didn't ask me one question. She wanted to know my date, how many people, and did I have a budget? And I said, my budget is flexible, but I said I did, but I wasn't going to tell her what it was, obviously. And she said, okay, give me your email address, I'll email you a proposal. And it came across, and it was just, even the proposal was awful. And I just think it's a real shame. Now, I have to say that was a meetings and events venue. So that wasn't a hotel. And I know that hotels are a lot different. They're better trained, they've got better processes, there's more systems, there's more structure to hotels. But a lot of business doesn't go to hotels, it goes to meetings and events venues. And I think that's something that the hotel world is now picking up on. There's a load of venues that get meetings and events that the hotels have never been interested before. So your competitors are not necessarily your other hotels. There are other venues as well, because they're mopping up a load of stuff, especially in London. That there's thousands of meetings and events venues. So, but then again, if you look at BDRC, BVA, BDRC, if you know those folk, they're they do a net promoter score, and they do a sort of a customer sentiment. They hit rock bottom, obviously, post-pandemic, because everybody left the industry and nobody knew what to do. So they were taking all these untrained people. Those customer sentiment scores are coming right back up again. In fact, they're surpassing what they were before. So the general trend is going up there, which is a good thing. Yeah.
I'm just looking at the time, and it's 28 minutes past 10. I did really want to ask you about weddings, but I'm actually thinking that weddings can be a session in their own right, because there's a lot going on in weddings. But in sort of less than a minute, can you give us a wedding summary? Because we have previously talked about this, because we were hearing from our members that weddings seem to be shrinking a little bit. What's the actual facts on that?
Weddings are, let me share my screen with you. I know I've only got a minute left, but this will be interesting. So, can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, so weddings, let's look at the lighter line, which is the intent. So that's the bookings for weddings. We can see, so this is 2022 at the end here, January 22, and we can see that weddings are down a little bit. Oh, look, there's a big spike in October 23. Why were there so many weddings booked in October 23? Anyway, that's a bit of a weird one. But you can see it's going down and down and down in terms of intent. And then if you look at the darker line, you can see, I mean, it's quite cyclical, isn't it? Winter months, there's not very many, then it gets busier during the summer months, and it goes down in the winter months again. But again, it's you can, you can visually see that it's not going up, right? I mean, there are spikes and there are bits of months that are better than the other, but it's not going bottom left to top right. It's going top left to bottom right, generally speaking. So that would imply that weddings are softening. So if weddings are your thing, now again, everything is contextualized, isn't it? If you've got an amazing wedding venue and you're rammed all year round, then you're probably rammed all year round. But if you're picking up a few weddings here and a few weddings there, maybe try and pick up something else. Maybe.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think they're what I had as well, shrinking in size as well as volume. But we have actually reached 10:30. So
Right.
thank you everybody for listening. Thank you especially to Peter. Really useful, nice chat. I always have to say that please remember that everything expressed today are opinions, and the stats are from Venue Performance. If you need formal advice, then please do approach me and I can introduce you to Peter if you don't already know him, or other professional advisors. Please do come to me for a referral if necessary. Please look at our website for other upcoming events. I mentioned Hospice in November, but we've got plenty going on before that. And as I said at the beginning, this will be uploaded to our website in the next few days, but our website is actually full of recordings of all our previous webinars and masterclasses. So please do take a look at hospa.org. But thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Peter.
You're very welcome. And if anybody wants to see any data, we've obviously Tony touched on a tiny bit of it. If anybody wants to have a look at what's going on in their sector, then just give me a shout and I'll happily show it to you.
Brilliant. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.